Greetings and welcome to The Black Room. This is the podcast for all things erotic mind control, and I am your host, Callidus. And I'm back, and it's been a while, and I mean it's been a while since I've been on the microphone and here speaking with you. As I look on my website, I see May 20th, 2016, so I've almost gone 12 months without an episode. That's quite a hiatus. But I'll talk about I'll talk a little about what happened in the bottom half of last year that kind of kept me away, and what I've been up to, which what I've been up to has not been Callidus related stuff, or not very much of it, just a little bit, but that is starting to change. I'm beginning to kind of turn the corner on all of that, which is why I'm here with you right now, and very happy to be back with you, talking with you about everything that's going on in my world and the greater world of erotic mind control. On this episode, I'm going to talk about a really, really talented artist that should definitely be in your orbit if you're a fan of hypnotic mind control and or have a bit of a foot fetish, a Patreon artist that you're really going to want to check out. I'm going to talk a little bit about the upcoming issue of the core comic from Uzubono and Tabuko, because it wouldn't be an episode of The Black Room if we didn't talk about the core comic series, since it is basically my favorite thing ever. I'm going to talk a little bit about the latest manip I did, which was done at the 11th hour of 2016. It's called Failsafe, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that. Going to give you some Tumblr recommendations. I say recommendations plural, but it's actually just one. But if there's only going to be one recommendation, this is going to be the recommendation for you, and you'll see what that means when we get there. And then also, I've got a podcast recommendation, which is probably not in my best interest to mention other podcasts on my podcast, but it's one that you'll probably want to check out, as it's very much related to the topic at hand, and quite fun to listen to. And then, of course, in the bottom half of this show, we are finally going to get to the second half of my extraordinary interview with Jukebox, and it's only been a year in the making. It's actually something I'll talk a little bit about later, but that's one of the things that I'm probably most ashamed of, is that I went on hiatus and had to break up this terrific conversation with Jukebox over these two episodes. I feel especially bad because I think the bottom half is quite good. Lady Ruetha makes an appearance in the second half that you're going to hear on this episode, and I'm sorry that didn't make it out there. I'm sorry for all of it, but anyway, definitely stick around for that terrific second half of my interview with Jukebox. Right off the bat, though, I want to talk about Sleepy Gimp. Now, if you don't know who Sleepy Gimp is, although if you're on Tumblr, you may very well know who Sleepy Gimp is, because his artwork has been moving around on Tumblr for quite some time, and he has a Tumblr of his own that he posts his work to. But he also set up a Patreon at some point. I'm actually not sure how old his Patreon is. But Sleepy Gimp is an artist, and he is an amazing artist, a really, really talented illustrator. He does single panels. He's done a couple of comic books, and a lot of it has to do with mind control. I would not say that mind control or hypnosis is his sole focus, which is a little bit of a play on words, because Sleepy Gimp's main fetish, I think, is probably feet, women's feet in particular. This guy loves ladies' feet, and so that is always, I think, the main sort of thrust of his artwork. But he also, as his name would imply, he also does have some real interest in the sleepy fetish. And, so of course that is chloroform, but that's also sort of hypnosis and trance and mind control. So, all of these things are in the orbit. And I would be shocked to discover if there are some of you listening that don't have some overlap with the chloroform stuff or with the feet stuff. So Sleepy Gimp is somebody that you may very well appreciate on all the same points that he's operating on. But his artwork is absolutely amazing. And from what he has said on his Tumblr and or Patreon, I get the impression that he works in the film or television industry doing some kind of concept artwork or something like that. So this is somebody who is a professional artist and it shows in the quality and the speed at which he works. His Patreon page is a great place to get a sense of all the different kinds of things that he's doing. He does commissions. He does he does a regular comic series where he'll do like an update every month, four new pages into an ongoing series. He actually just finished up his second run on a terrific title called Nancy Templeton and the Mystery of the Vanished Heiress. And Nancy Templeton, I believe, is an original character of his. She's this sort of Nancy Drew-esque detective, private detective who's always looking into things she shouldn't be, and then getting into delicious, kinky, sexy trouble as a result. And there was another comic with Nancy Templeton before this, the name of which escapes me, but it was more of a knockout fetish kind of thing. There was quite a bit of like smothering and chloroform and that kind of stuff, and a lot of kinky bondage, sex, lesbian sex with these two dominatrix characters that Sleepy's very, very fond of, and always work their way into his commission pieces and just his one-offs and stuff. That first Nancy Templeton comic, like I said, that was just kind of good, clean, kinky fun. The second one was really, really mind control focused. That was really, really great. It had brainwashing. It had sort of swinging pendant hypnosis. There was a hypnotist, as in a stage hypnotist character, who was kind of in charge of the a lot of the evil goings on in this comic. And as the name implies, the vanished heiress. There is this well-known sort of local celebrity woman who's disappeared and has fallen into the clutches of this evil stage hypnotist. And there's some really, really fantastic brainwashing and mind control sequences in that comic. And there's also a lot of one-off images that he does. Again, some are very much mind control, hypnosis related, things like that, and some less so, but there's always a great aspect of dominance and submission and power exchange and things like that. So it's all kind of in the orbit of erotic mind control, at least for me. So if I haven't talked him up enough for you yet, I don't know what else I can say other than it's hot. It's really, really hot. The women that he draws, very much the kind of like the adolescent male American fantasy. These kind of wasp-shaped hips and these enormous breasts and very, very curvaceous thighs and butts and just amazing legs and feet, obviously, since he is such a fan of feet. But he does, draws like really, really amazing, spectacular figures, and very, very much has his own style. And that's the thing, like you can see a Sleepy Gimp image and immediately know it's his. He really has a distinct style, and it's very, very detailed, very, very slick looking, but which I mean sort of metaphorically as well as literally. He does really terrific work with wet look types of things, whether it's just, sort of like an oil sheen on skin or with, actual liquid dripping effects. I can't imagine what he'd be drawing that would be dripping, but anyway, the point is that it's sexy. It's really sexy, and I highly encourage you to head over to his Tumblr, where he's posted a lot of his work. And then if you like it as much as I do, perhaps you'll do what I did and become a patron of his on Patreon and support his artwork directly. And he has multiple pay levels set up depending on what kind of commitment you're prepared to make to Sleepy Gimp and his artwork, but I think that it's well worth it. He's a fantastic artist, and I am very, very happy to contribute a little bit each month to help keep him putting out this amazing mind control related artwork. Sleepy Gimp on Tumblr and on Patreon. Go look him up. You will be turned on, is my prediction. So from that, let's move on to me. Let's talk about me just a little bit. And I do only want to talk about me a very little bit, but I feel obligated to at least give some kind of explanation for what's going on. And I've received a few emails from people who are concerned. Ironically enough, Thrall tells me that she's received a couple of inquiries on my behalf So I guess some people have just given up on messaging me and they're starting to message my friends and see if I'm doing okay. I guess the short version of this story is that I'm doing pretty well right now, but that the bottom half of last year was kind of a train wreck and was not very fun for me. Nothing, like I'm in good health, nothing life threatening or anything, but just problems, just life problems that all of us go through at various times. But essentially, what happened last year is my employment situation went from being really, really stable and having been that way for, a decade or more to, oh, we think you're probably going to lose your job. And then it was like, oh, that's not good. I should probably start figuring out a plan B. And then it was, oh yeah, you're going to lose your job on this day. And then it was just kind of full on panic. And so suddenly just kind of having my financial health upended with this job scare, and just immediately throwing myself into the process of job hunting and creating a resume and a portfolio and all of the things that I had kind of neglected over the years, just thinking that I wouldn't really need them. All of a sudden, I've got to throw all my effort into that situation, and so a bit of it was just me focusing my time elsewhere, but also I really fell into this kind of depression, and I began to feel like anything that I was doing with my time that wasn't related to finding a job or improving my prospects or networking or something like that was a waste of my time. And so that kind of mental state made it really difficult for me to kind of be Callidus and to do my site or my work or even correspond with people in email. I felt guilty about doing it, and whether or not that was in itself a healthy or unhealthy thing or the right or the wrong thing, I don't know. But I guess it's what I needed to do at the time to kind of get my priorities set. And anybody that's been in that situation, especially when you have a family, which I do, it's terrifying. It's one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced is the sudden prospect of not knowing what's going to happen to me and my family and our home and our life because of this financial uncertainty. So to make a not as short story as I wanted it to be, but to bring this not so short story to a close, I was very fortunate in that after all of the trauma and the terror and everything, I got to keep my job, and everybody that I work with did as well. We were kind of spared the trip to the guillotine, and so I was able to keep on working steadily. And in addition to that, though, I guess for my own feeling of security and everything, I began to say, well, if my job situation is not as stable as I thought it was going to be, then I need to start branching out and putting some supports down somewhere else to shore things up in case something like this were to happen again. And so with that in mind, I've started taking on a lot more freelance work or vanilla freelance work. And so that has impeded my time just a little bit since I'm essentially kind of doing a job and a half right now. But it's also put me back into a place mentally where I'm much happier and much more hopeful and secure, and I'm ready to kind of be Callidus again. I'm ready to kind of have my hobby on the side and do the things that I enjoy doing. And so I've been quietly behind the scenes doing stuff. I've got several pieces that I've been working on for off and on for a couple of months. I've got a massive website redesign that I've been tooling around with. I just haven't been posting to the site, and that was kind of the last thing is I was kind of neglecting was just my communication, email and otherwise. So now that I'm kind of breaking through that last barricade, I feel like I'm ready to kind of come out of hibernation in this hiatus and get back to doing what I love doing, which is making erotic mind control smut, and I hope to be doing it again and doing it for a very long time as well. So thank you for indulging me for this little anecdote, and for those of you who did check in on me, who were a little bit concerned and everything, I do appreciate all of that. I appreciate your thoughts and whatnot. But I'm doing okay. I'm doing quite a bit better than I was. So absolutely nothing to complain about at this point. That's the main thing. As far as the upcoming projects go, since that's a little bit more fun to talk about, let's talk about that. I've got several pieces that are completed in terms of the imagery and the animation, and they just need writing. I've kind of started ideas. I've written a little bit. I've got a concept, an outline. They're all in kind of various stages of uncompletion in terms of the writing. So that's 3 or 4 pieces that once I get a really good idea, get inspired, those will get knocked out, and I'll start putting those out. One piece that I have been writing on really, really consistently is a piece that I teased, and I may have actually talked about it on the podcast at some point, but I can't remember because the last episode was a year ago. But I teased a manip on my site quite a while ago that featured a woman who was tied down to this table by rope. She was spread eagle on this long dining table. And I think I talked about at the time some of what I planned to do with the image, some of the ideas that I had, and it was sort of a cult theme that she'd been captured by some kind of cult. There was some sort of supernatural business at work. She was an adventurer of some type, kind of a Laura Croft and Indiana Jones, cut from that kind of Tomb Raider mold. That image was the starting point for this manip series, because it's branched out to several other images at this point, and I've been writing on the caption, and by writing on the caption, I mean I'm somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 words. So I mean I'm basically writing a short story with this thing, like an actual short story, as opposed to as opposed to just a really long manip. Like this thing is actually going to be a read. But I don't know, something about the, as I thought about the character and as I thought about kind of the story that led up to the moment that we see in the manip, which that's kind of like the end in that one image with her tied to the table. As I begin to think about everything that could have kind of led up to that, normally I edit myself really, really heavily. And traditionally that's just been because, my text was actually being put into the image. It was part of the JPEG along with, the photograph. And so as a result of that, I could only make it so big. I could only make the JPEG so big. I could only make the dimensions so big, and, the font size and all that. And so traditionally I have really limited myself in my writing just because I kind of had to. It was just limitations of the medium. And as I've retooled my website and changed how I display text, it's no longer part of the image, but it's separate from the image and everything. That's kind of opened me up to do a little bit more long form stuff. And so with this one, I said, I'm just going to go for broke. Like, I'm not going to limit myself at all. I'm just going to write whatever I want to write, and I'll just kind of see how it turns out. And I've been writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And I've got, as I said, I've got several thousand words at this point. I've still got the last kind of chapter to finish. So, I mean, it's easily going to be 8,000 or 9,000 by the time I'm done, depending on how much I edit. Because there's a lot of it that I feel like might get excised. So, I don't know what the final count will be, but it'll be easily the longest thing I've ever written. And I'm actually having a lot of fun with the manip work too. And not all of it is the obvious, sexy stuff that I normally do, brainwashed, hypnotized women or hypnotizing women and that kind of thing. I've done a lot of manip work that is just kind of to establish like location and things like that. And I'm really, I'm really actually having enormous fun with that. It's different from the stuff that I normally do, although it's not too dissimilar from some of the vanilla projects that I've done over the years. But it's been really fun to kind of do that kind of work in this context. And there's just something about the evocative sense that it creates, at least for me, the sense of time and place, and just giving a little bit of insight into the world, which is normally the thing that I have to do in the writing. Normally, the manip itself is a very focused, kind of claustrophobic sort of moment captured in time, and anything that happens outside of that specific moment has to be suggested in the writing. And so it's been kind of a nice change of pace to not do that solely in the writing, but also to have some imagery to go along with it. And I hope it'll break up the text enough that people won't be too scared from indulging and doing a little bit of reading. And I've actually been kind of thinking about how I'm going to release it, and maybe doing it in installments so that I can break it up so that, it's something that, number one, it's a little bit more digestible, but number two, it will maybe actually make for some good pacing to kind of read a little bit and then, take a little bit of time, maybe wait for the following week before the next bit comes out. But I have to think about how that's going to work I've never really had to kind of think about that type of thing before, but in terms of like the pacing, like how much do I have enough sort of erotic stuff happening like in each chapter that people will actually want to read through it? Like is there enough sort of goodie bag stuff to kind of carry people through to read, what would normally be the boring parts? And I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I assume on some level, not everybody, but I assume that a lot of people, it's kind of like, watching porn with the story and everybody's just fast forwarding through the talking until somebody starts taking their clothes off. I assume that a lot of viewers are going to be like that. And so I try to kind of think about that and just try to keep things as on pace as possible. Like, still get the storytelling and the fun stuff in there, but, get to the sexy stuff because, I mean, let's face it, that's what we're here for. Or at least that's what I'm here for, typically. I mean, I came for the naked ladies. I can't speak for anybody else. But that, which I'm tentatively calling cult, that manip is going to be coming out at some point. Once I finish writing and editing and see if there's any other manip work to be done, that'll be out, and I'll be very curious to see what people think about it. All right. From my latest project to Tabaco and Uzubono's latest project, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I think that the core comic from Tabaco and Uzubono is possibly the hottest thing in the erotic mind control community right now. I love it. That was 3 or 4 loves, but I love this comic. So for those of you who don't know what Core is, just a really brief overview. Core is a 3D poser comic book done by Uzubono, who is an amazing poser artist. So this is all rendered in poser by her, and it's written by Tabaco. It's set in a I guess kind of a mid to distant future, couple hundred years from now, kind of a dystopian future. I mean, they got flying cars and ridiculous nanite technology and that kind of thing. So, I'm thinking it's, like a 22nd century kind of setup. But anyway, so it's this, think this kind of Blade Runner dystopian future where mind control is in use everywhere. And there's different types of mind control used by these different factions who all have different goals and things like that. And then there is this special kind of law enforcement agency called CORE, who polices those kinds of things in addition to other kind of crimes that are maybe a little bit out of the league of the local police department. And so the series ran 10 issues, and that kind of constituted the first arc, the first run of the story. And so picking up with issue 11, we're kind of coming back after a little bit of a breather, and after there was a little bit of a conclusion at the end of issue 10. I mean, like I said, it was definitely kind of an arc that closed at the end of issue 10. So it's going to be really interesting to see what new direction things might move in in issue number 11. The writing's fantastic. The characters are fantastic. I think that, Tabako's really conscious of, of trying to, find, new and fun ways of introducing all the sexy mind-controlledness in each issue. And it's always fun to kind of see what characters that's going to get expressed through and what fiendish devices that Uzubono will find to include in the action and that type of thing. And the cast of characters has grown large enough that there's a lot of directions that it can go and a lot of diversity and the types of things that can be explored. The thing that I was sort of thinking about in getting excited for issue 11, which by the way comes out tomorrow, or actually I guess it's today because it's after midnight now, but as I record this on Friday, April the 7th, issue 11 is going to be out some point in the next 24 hours, so I'm very excited about it. I think looking back over the series, the thing that I'm most fond of is this character Melanie, and there's sort of three main protagonists that are friends: Melanie, Nicole, and Tammy. And it's a really interesting kind of journey that they've all been through, but Melanie has kind of emerged as my favorite character because she's gone, I think, on the most interesting kind of journey, a lot of ups and downs. She's had a lot of brushes with mind control. She's, almost gotten captured and almost gotten mind controlled a few times. And then at some point it happened and they got her and they brainwashed her and she is completely enslaved now, and it is so hot. It is so hot. And the things that she's doing in the last few issues of Core, like issues 8 through 10, boy, it is spicy stuff. And the thing is, it's not quite brought to a resolution. I mean, you definitely know that. I think that there's a little bit of a period of time where it's gray, where you're not sure where Melanie is. That you think, well, I mean, she's resisting, or she certainly seems to be like she's tempted, but maybe she hasn't quite gone over. And then at some point, Tabako kind of pulls the curtain open, and you're like, oh nope, she's totally brainwashed. She's a drone. She's a slave, and oh, it's hot. I think I mentioned that. And so knowing that she is a very willing, eager slave to the hive, there's some threads that Tabako leaves in issue number 10, some things that Melanie does that we haven't seen the repercussions of yet. And so I'm very curious to see if we begin to see the repercussions of those actions in issue 11. So anyway, Core issue 11. If you're an early subscriber, if you filled out their survey, then you got it on Wednesday. If you're a schlub like me who keeps saying on a podcast that you're going to do the survey so you can get the early issue, and then you keep procrastinating and not doing it, then you got to wait until today, April the 7th. By the time you hear this, it's probably already in the past, and hopefully you've already seen it and you know how hot it is. Because I'm sure it's hot, because the combined might of Tabako and Uzubono is a thing to be reckoned with. So look for Core issue 11 on DeviantArt now, basically. Let's talk a little bit more about my stuff, because I did manage to get one last manip piece finished before 2016 closed out. As I was getting to the end of the year, I realized, wow, I've done 2 things this year, and I wasn't very happy about that. Not a very productive year, one of my least productive years ever. And as I got down to December, I thought, I really want to put out at least one more thing. And so I had this piece lying around that I hadn't really done anything with, but I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do with it. And I thought, I'll just work on this. And so over the course of a few nights, I put this animation together called Failsafe, and it ended up coming out on December the 30th, 2016. So like I said, right as the door was closing. Failsafe was a lot of fun. The main thing about it is that the model featured in it is an adult actress named Randy Moore, who is great, and she's done some hypnosis themed things. Like if you've ever watched any of the Cat's Eye Diamond series from Christina Carter's website, Randy Moore showed up in several of those, and she's a pretty good performer, and she's decent at kind of doing the trance stuff. And she's got a sexy voice. She's got this kind of sultry, smoky kind of voice that I really like. But she normally appears as a blonde, and I'll reveal a little bit about myself right now. I kind of have a thing for redheads, and I dated a redhead when I was a younger man, and that's why I have a thing for redheads now. So I came across this really cool picture of Randy Moore as a redhead. At some point, in her modeling career, she was dyeing her hair, I guess. And so I've got her as a redhead, and she's in this really tight rope bondage tied to this chair. And so in the image, she's in this chair, legs bound very tightly, arms bound behind her back. She's tied to the chair, she's tied to herself, and her body is facing away from camera, but she is straining in the bonds, turning back towards camera, looking at something out of frame with this very, kind of frightened expression on her face. And then behind her, in the room that she's sitting in, there's this big widescreen TV on a wall. And as soon as I saw it, I just thought, oh, come on, this is too good. Randy Moore's a redhead, she's tied to this chair, there's this TV. And immediately it evoked this kind of story in my head of, she's being placed in this kind of brainwashing room. She knows what's going on. She knows to be afraid. She's turning around. Either she's looking, towards the door. She's looking towards, someone who maybe she thinks is going to help or something like that. Or she's just trying not to look at the screen because she knows if she looks too long, they'll have her too. And that was kind of my initial thought with it. And so I sat down, I did the manipulation work, and as I went through the process of doing the manipulation work, I could not help but think of the room from Orientation, that mind control video that I put out so many years ago. And there's just a lot of similarities in the TV being mounted on the wall and all these other things. And so I kind of took some inspiration from that and ended up kind of recreating some of those effects with this animation. And then as I thought about that more, I thought, it'd be kind of maybe fun to have this piece be part of the Impero Clinic mythos. And with that in mind, I kind of set out to write this story, which is, it's a common trope in mind control, the nosy reporter who sticks their nose where it shouldn't belong, and they end up getting caught up in mind control shenanigans, sexy mind control shenanigans, mind you. And I thought it might be fun to do kind of a story like that, but from a different perspective. And so what's going on in the manip is the character played by Randy Moore, who I think I named Randy because I'm incredibly imaginative, is this character she is someone's failsafe. She is the friend, the acquaintance, the associate of, she's the confidant. She's the trusted confidant of the nosy reporter sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. And she's the person who gets, the phone call or the text message that says, okay, I'm going to be doing something over the next 2 days that might be a little sketchy. And if you don't hear from me by this day and this time, with, a particular coded message or something, some kind of all clear message. If you don't hear from me in a couple of days, you need to bring in the cavalry. You need to get a hold of the police. You need to come find me because something's happened. And so the story picks up after this 2-day period or whatever has come and gone, and Randy suddenly kind of realizes that something's happened to her friend. For the first time, she's not gotten the all clear message. And so Randy has to try to figure out what to do now. And so that's kind of the kicking off point for the story. And then the image, her tied to a chair in a brainwashing room, that'll kind of give you some indication of where it ends up. But I think the journey between A and B is good enough to go on without, with some minor spoilers included. But anyway, Failsafe was it was a lot of fun. It was fun to write. It was fun to do. And like I said, it's always I've always wanted to to do something with Randy Moore, being a fan of her and everything. So that was quite a bit of fun as well. But if you haven't checked it out, and if you that's the thing, if you just check my blog, you'd never know that I uploaded this. You'd actually have to go into the gallery to see that that I posted it, because I didn't make any kind of blog post about it. And I don't think I posted it to Tumblr or Twitter or anything like that. So it's just been quietly sitting on my site. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's pretty cool, I think, and hopefully you as well. Speaking of Tumblr, I want to make a Tumblr recommendation to you. I know that Tumblr is let's face it, it's a pretty big place. And if you are a mind control kind of if you're a mind control kind of fan, and you want to go on Tumblr and find cool mind control stuff, it can be a little bit like sitting down with the internet for the first time and going to Google and saying hypnosis sex or something like that. Like, finding the starting point can be sometimes a little bit daunting. Fortunately, a very helpful person on Tumblr, who is called Scarlet Red 912, has curated a terrific list that's updated regularly. I think the last time it was updated was mid-February. But this person curates a list of hypnosis-related blogs on Tumblr. The post is called a not official list of hypnosis stuff on Tumblr. So it says exactly what it does. And it's very helpful in that regard as well. But this list is dozens, if not hundreds, of entries long. There is a lot of links to Tumblrs, and it's somewhat categorized. You've got personalities, doms, dames. You've got artist blogs, which I am very honored to be on the list. In that entry, you've got curated content, hypnosis reposts, captioned images where people have just taken porn images and added hypnosis related captions. You've got personal blogs of people who do hypnosis or mind control related things, and all kinds of stuff like that. And like I said, there's a lot of stuff here. So if you want to check out some of the hypno-kinky stuff that's on Tumblr, and there's some fantastic hypno-kinky stuff on Tumblr, I'm here to tell you, then this is the launch pad for all of your sexy fun time adventures. So I have a link in the show notes that will get you there. But of course, if you just want to search on Tumblr for Scarlet Red 912, spelled SCARLETTRED 912, Scarlet Red 912 on Tumblr, you will find the not official list of hypnosis stuff on Tumblr, and it will lead you to many sexy, smutty things. And you're welcome. All right. I told you that I was going to make a podcast recommendation against my better judgment, against my own best interest, perhaps, because it is a hypnosis and erotic hypnosis related podcast. And it is called the Two Hyp Chicks podcast. And as you may have already guessed, because you're a clever person, the hip is spelled HYP. And I'm not sure all of the places this is available. It's on YouTube, which is where I've found it and listened to it. There's also some kind of presence on Tumblr. Either one or both of the hosts may be on Tumblr as well. But I've certainly seen posts on Tumblr, kind of talking about the show. So anyway, the Two Hyp Chicks podcast is really, really fun and does something quite different from this podcast, in that the two people who host it, one of which is Sleeping Girl and the other is CC Kitten, they are, well, I hesitate to say exactly what their relationship is because I don't know. I've only listened to a couple of episodes of the show, the first two. They've done many at this point, but at this point, I'm not exactly positive what the nature of the relationship is, but at the very least, they have some kind of kinky DS kind of relationship going on. And they also have quite a bit of interest in erotic hypnosis, mind control, and brainwashing, and all of those things that I find so delightful. And it's really, really interesting to listen to two people who incorporate this into their play, talk about it, and talk about, just in a very practical sense, like in the first episode that I listened to, the first episode of the show, they have a really interesting conversation about, okay, so if you're in a relationship with a partner who is brainwashed, how do you trust that person's opinion when you ask them for honest advice on, just something like something work related that you're doing? Like, hey, I'm thinking about bringing out this idea at work. What do you think? And your brainwashed partner says, yes, I love it. It sounds like a wonderful idea. How do you know if you're getting a really honest kind of critique of your idea versus getting the response that you've conditioned into your play partner through nefarious erotic mind control sorts of machinations? So that immediately captured my imagination, and it's the exact kind of thing, being an analytical sort of person, it's the exact kind of thing that I wonder about in the journey from fantasy to reality, which a lot of people in this fetish make that transition. I don't so much myself. I mostly kind of swim in the fantasy realm of our fetish, and I'm very happy there. But for people who do make this part of their life, part of their kink life, their sex life, there's some very practical kinds of questions to ask about some of these hurdles. And so the fact that you're getting this really interesting discourse and these great conversations and discussion from people who are in the community, not just in the community, but active in the kind of the mind control lifestyle as well, it's just really, really interesting to listen to. I've only listened to a couple of episodes. There's a lot more to go, but I think that it's well worth your time. As they say on their descriptions, mostly what you're going to hear two women getting drunk and talking about DS and kink and mind control and hypnosis and all these things. And it's a lot of fun. It's been intriguing. It's been insightful, and it's been very, very enjoyable through the two episodes I've listened to. I'm very anxious to work my way through the rest. So if you are looking for another erotic hypnosis podcast, and let's face it, with the frequency of updates of this erotic mind control podcast, I wouldn't blame you for looking for something else to pad out the downtime. I think that theirs is a fine addition to make. Assuming that they actually post the audio podcast somewhere, you might be able to subscribe to it. I'm not certain of that, but at the very least, you can subscribe to them on YouTube and listen to them that way. Two Hyp Chicks, two TWO HYP Chicks, the Two Hyp Chicks podcast with Sleeping Girl and CC Kitten. I like it, and I think you will too. And with that, I finally, after 11 months, get to say, now I am delighted to bring you the second half of my thoroughly enjoyable conversation with the magnificent author, Jukebox. I am ashamed and not at all happy that it has taken so long to get part 2 of this interview out. Generally speaking, when I break up the interviews the way that I do across 2 episodes, I like to put those out in a timely fashion. There's just a certain thing about the prescience of the episode in people's minds, and I really wish that this hadn't happened the way that it did, but can't really change that now. All I can do is say that I am so very, very thankful to both Jukebox and Lady Ruetha for agreeing to chat with me and for just sharing their insight. Of course, they're, like we were just talking about, they're in a real life hypno-kinky relationship, and it's really, really fun to hear them together and talking about this subject matter coming from from that place, from that perspective. Thoroughly enjoyable conversation. Jukebox is, one of the mainstay pillars of the erotic fiction segment of our community. Just a very clever, brilliant guy, and so very, very fun to talk to and to get the insight into his work and his process, and find out a little bit about the artists behind all those amazing stories. So, I think there's been enough of a delay finally getting to this, so I'm going to stop talking now and just let you hear the second half of my terrific conversation with Jukebox. When you sit down at your computer, when you fire up your web browser and you're in the mood to go seeking out something in the world of erotic mind control, where do your clicks end up taking you?
Fly By Night is a pretty commonly referenced author in that context.
Jo's great.
Yeah.
I mean, she's really good. In addition to being a cornerstone of the community, she's also mad talented.
Yeah. She's. I mean, part of it is, as a submissive myself, I tend to want to read things from the perspective of the person who is being hypnotized.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because I just think that's always the more fun of the two perspectives.
I tend to agree. I didn't realize that I do the exact same thing. I don't know that I've ever written anything from the perspective of a dominant.
I have, but I may not be the best person to go by on that score, because I've written iambic pentameter porn. So
yes, I've attempted iambic pentameter porn, but during the revision process, I'm like, I don't know, this isn't quite working as well as I thought it was going to.
Oh man,
I might need a little bit more practice.
That one just about broke me, but I could not get the idea out of my head until I had written it. It was in there. And every time I heard Enter Sandman on the radio,
mm-hmm.
it would come back to me, and I'd just be like, I can't do this. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this. There's absolutely no way I'm going to pull this off. And finally, my brain was just like, you do not have the deciding vote in this.
Got to make this happen.
Yeah, there's a few stories in my work like that where it's just like my brain said, no, you aren't going to write this story. I mean, actually, the one I posted just last week, Learn to Fly, was one where I must have come up with that idea and discarded it a dozen times, because it really is just an erotic mind control version of the joke about the two guys drinking on top of the Empire State Building.
Where do this raises a really, I mean, like really one of the questions that I've always wanted to ask you for years and years and years. Where do the ideas come from? Do you just sit down and see, what kind of inspires you? I imagine you have, like a lot of us, kind of a, big backlog of, just scribbled notes and, this might be interesting, but you, considering that you have such a variety of ideas in your work and, that go in so many different places, I really have to say that I'm quite envious of your imagination.
I think it really is just, you hear things and they sort of spark the beginnings of an idea. And I think this is one of the big advantages of using song titles, is it comes back. Every time I hear, like the story Double Vision, I had the rough idea for that story, the extremely rough idea, years earlier, but it never seemed to quite click. But every time that song came on the radio, the idea would pop back into my head, and I'd refine it a little, or I'd take a little bit of a different direction with it, and I'd just sit there and hammer at it. And actually, that was one of the reasons for my second big hiatus, was I changed jobs. For a long time, from like 2007 to 2010, I had a job where it was just purely monkey work. It was just working with your hands. And so my brain would be free to rework and re-edit ideas in my head over and over and over again, until really they felt 90% of the way written before I even sat down at the keyboard. And I think that was where a lot of the where do you get your ideas, it's just really from kind of trial and error. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention that also getting brainwashed frequently and repeatedly myself by Lady Ruetha
might be a contributing factor.
Yeah. There are a lot of stories that contain elements of real life to some degree or another.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because it's one of those things that I'm certainly aware of. Having been a fan of yours over the years and having read, read your author's notes and your blog and so forth. But you have a very well established relationship with Lady Ruetha.
I certainly hope so.
And is she there with you?
She is. She walked.
I just wandered in about 5 minutes ago.
Hi, Lady R. Nice to talk to you.
Nice to finally hear a voice to go with the text.
Yeah, well, sorry to disappoint on that count. It's not nearly as impressive as I wish. How did the two of you meet? I assume that you were both already kind of in the scene, or did you guys happen to know each other before you kind of made your appearance on the archive?
No, actually, I got to know her because she sent me fan mail. It was the 4th story I think I wrote, Simply Irresistible. Mm-hmm. And she sent me an email saying that she really liked it, and that was very gratifying to hear. And we started emailing back and forth quite a bit, and I had no idea who she was, really. I just thought she was this really awesome person who was, really fun to exchange emails with. And, then we started getting into IRC and chatting and stuff. And then we talked on the phone, and somewhere during that call, the penny dropped for her that she had no idea that I had no idea that she was a hypnotist. Mm-hmm. And
I don't know how I missed it.
And so she asked if I would like to be hypnotized, and that was really the first time I was ever actually hypnotized by anybody. And the story feels like the first time, with the exception of the very ending, which was kind of fictionalizing it as a flashback rather than a live event. But that was pretty much the story of what happened that day, almost moment for moment, thought for thought.
One of my favorite games to play is, you like Jukebox's stories? Let's see, can you tell me which ones are real life that are pretty much just transcribed something that I did do?
Right.
It's one of my favorite games to play,
I imagine that there's quite a few instances of that.
There are. All of them get fictionalized to some extent, simply because it's just things need to be elided to make for a more compact narrative. Like the story It's All Coming Back to Me Now actually compresses about 3 evenings worth of events into one, just because if we go on to, I always feel like if you go on too long with sexy bits, it runs the risk of just being repetitive.
Oh yeah, the pacing is vitally important in those matters.
So that was kind of the highlights of that of that weekend.
Right.
And there are some things obviously that are just things we wanted to do and never really got around to. I Can't Wait, for example, is not actually based on any kind of real life. But a lot of them, Joy to the World, there are a few details of that were changed, mostly just because they were too boringly mundane in real life, but for the most part, that story is exactly as it happened.
Right. How did your relationship with Lady Ruetha, you becoming a hypnotic subject that combined with your submissive nature, how did that change your stories? What was it, sort of a profound overnight thing where suddenly, wow, now that I have this direct experience, suddenly I want to write in this style, or I want to write about these things? Or was it something that built more slowly over time?
A little from column A, a little from column B. our relationship, we were kind of thinking that we were going to be just friends for a long time. And that was during the period, that first hiatus I took. I was not writing any EMC material, and we had a pretty profound talk one night. I think it was in 2007.
Yes.
Where we kind of opened up about what we'd been feeling about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the point where there was a good stretch where I was writing 5 or 6 stories a week. I would come home, I would write a complete story, I would go to bed, I would get up, I would go to work, I would plot it out in my head, I would sit down when I got home, I would write the whole thing out. It was just...
That's a remarkable level of productivity.
Yeah, that just having that unlocked, having that sense of really being part of a hypnotic DS relationship, it unlocked a lot, and also it did make my stories better. If you look at my first batch of stories from like 2000 to 2001, there's very little sex in them. I was not entirely at peace with writing erotica. I was just writing hypnosis stories, and I think if you look at one of the biggest changes, it was that the sex got a lot more intense and the hypnosis got a lot more authentic because I was experiencing it.
Right. Where does this might seem like a redundant question, but if you can kind of put a finger to this, how does your writing influence your sexuality? How does your sexuality influence your writing? Where's sort of the point of convergence between those two for you?
Well, I think a big part of the point of convergence is that Lady Ruetha remains, I think, my biggest fan. And I am, not to put a point on it, I am brainwashed as hell. And doing things that...
He says with delight.
Yeah.
Yes, pretty much. And doing things that make...
I wish you could see his smile right now. It's very large. And he's blushing.
Doing things that make her happy makes me happy, and she likes to read my stories, so writing is something that I feel very strong compulsion to do.
Yeah.
To the point, I know this is your interview, and I've been mostly staying quiet, but I do have to say, there have been times when he's been working overtime at work and coming home and writing and looking at me and going, I only got 2,000 words tonight. Is that okay? Yes, honey, that's fine. Come here. Save your work and turn off the computer. You're okay.
How much do you... How much of a role do you have in the writing? How much of a manager over the proceedings do you have at any given time?
I do not control anything about what he's writing. I might give him ideas to let perk in the back of his brain, but what he writes is his. He's the one that it's coming through. I am his muse, but I don't sing to him. I just rub it.
That's well put.
I just rub the back of his neck while he's doing it and tell him what a good boy he is. Because he is.
Right.
And also she, kind of does help with some of the day-to-day management of, the non-kink life that we all have to have, unfortunately.
Boo, sad face.
Yeah, I know. It's not. I wish I could have a life like all of my fictional characters where I could, use my mind control powers to be unimaginably wealthy, but it doesn't happen that way.
But alas.
Yeah, so she does help with kind of making sure I have mental and physical and temporal space in which to write, which is important. Because, I had a big second hiatus because, like I said, I had changed jobs. I was not... writing was becoming more and more of an effort due to the limits of time, and I felt to focus my limited time on writing that had the potential to make me money. And actually, Madame Kistula really was influential in getting me back into writing mind control stuff, because I saw that she had this Patreon thing, and she kept talking about it, and she would put little advertisements for it in her work, and I'm like, I should look at this and find out what it is. And I'm like, oh, this is a way, to get people to contribute to make my work something that I can actually support myself with, and, not necessarily, pay all of my bills with, but at least, at the end of the month, I don't feel like I am wasting my time on something that I'm writing just for fun.
Yeah, it's a way to offset the time that you spend on your hobby, because it does take time, and time is money, as the adage goes.
Yeah, and also, there's kind of this thing, Douglas Adams talked about it, called, he didn't call it this, but it's opportunity cost. If you're writing thing A, you can't be writing thing B.
Yeah.
And so, you need to make sure that the thing A is not going to take away from a thing B that is going to, make you money.
This is very true. It's a very practical consideration, but yes, it's very, very true.
Yeah.
How has your Patreon been going? I don't remember when you set it up, but I've noticed it just within the last 6 months that it's been in your stories, but I'm not sure how long you've actually been operating it.
Since coming back from my hiatus, pretty much. I set it up and then began posting stories from it, starting with One Thing Leads to Another, I think it was the and it's been going well. There are definitely some people who see my work as valuable, and that is something, that it's not just the practical level, it's knowing that there are people who are literally willing to put down a sum of money, $1 or $2 every week, and say, your work is worth this to me. It's emotionally validating, even during a week where, nobody's reviewing the stories, or where I'm not getting any fan letters, or where it just feels like, I'm dropping it into a void. I'm still seeing people contribute that money and tell me in a very real sense that this is a work that had some meaning to them, that they wanted to spend their real dollars on.
It's exceptionally gratifying, I would imagine.
It is, and it's also motivating. During weeks where I'm really tired, like this week or last week, I still make time to sit down and write 1 or 2 stories a week, because I know that there are people who really want to see them. And that I think is something that you can't underestimate. Every week when I post, my little blog updates to Patreon, where I tell everyone that the new story is up, I always say, thank you very much for your kind and generous support, of my stories, of my writing. And every time I write that, it's never not true.
It's wonderful to know that there's an audience waiting and eager for your work. It really does make all the effort worthwhile.
Yeah, I will say, actually, Tumblr was also something of a shock in that regard. I made a Tumblr account kind of on a whim, and
yeah. And suddenly we're inundated with followers, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've got like 900 followers, and there's people. Somebody just today said, "Oh my God, Jukebox reblogged some of my work. I've hit the big time now."
Right.
From somebody who has known him for so long, by the way, it is so. And when he says that I'm his biggest fan, he's really not kidding. I have. It's worth reiterating. I wrote him fan mail. That's how we met.
Right.
And so to watch him go through this whole Tumblr thing has been just so awesome. Because I'm like, because I get to say, I get to say in a very positive way, told you so.
Right.
And B, because I'm a geek and I love sharing things I love, and his writing is one of the things I love. So I love watching people squee over his writing because we're geeky, because then, it's like that happy geek, oh, you like this too thing.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the thing that has been most appealing to me is that it's gotten us one step closer to my fictitious nirvana, which is the day that Jukebox starts doing photo manips. But seeing you captioning photos and things like that on Tumblr has been just tremendous. And as somebody who's been doing it, for a pretty long time, it really is inspiring to see someone with your level of talent and sophistication as a writer swim in those waters, and it shines a new light on things for me. I'm like, oh yeah, you can do that. Oh, that's a good idea. I should have thought of that myself. And it's been a nice kind of kick of inspiration seeing some of the captioning work that you've done.
Thank you. I think that I will let you continue doing the manipulations because you are way more talented at it than I think I will ever be. I think my biggest skill was photoshopping the monkey from Dora the Explorer into another image once.
Hey, that's where it starts, though. From there, I mean, once you've done that, it's just practice.
We need to get him together with Winter Rose, like in person.
I've actually, if you guys have any influence over Winter Rose, I'd approached him, and you have to understand that Callidus exists because of Winter Rose.
Well,
more, my influence is primarily authors, but the one person whose work, like, all I wanted to do when I started out in Photoshop, all I wanted to do was try to be Winter Rose. His work is such a foundational part of my own catalog, and I have approached him about appearing on the show, and we just haven't been able to kind of get things to line up. But I would love to have a conversation with Winter Rose.
I'm sending him a message on Facebook right now.
Well, thank you. I'm in your debt. So you said something a few minutes ago that I want to circle back to and ask you to expand on a little bit. You said that early on, you said something to the effect of, prior to your relationship with Lady Ruetha, that you were a little bit sketchy about the idea of writing sex in your stories, that you were writing hypnosis stories, not necessarily erotic stories. And I would like you to talk about that a little bit more. When you were first getting into it, was there a sense of fear maybe about what you were getting into, about implications it might have had for a vanilla career path, those kinds of things? Can you just talk about that aspect of it?
No, really, when I got into it, and I may have told this story before on my blog, but when I got into it, it was with the intent that it was going to be 20 stories. That was going to be my output.
Okay.
Because the origin of all of this came from buying a CD, the 80s New Wave Millennium Party compilation CD. And I was listening to She Blinded Me with Science.
Right.
And I don't know how familiar you are with that song.
I've heard it more than once or twice.
Yeah. So you know the bit about, her eye is as deep as any ocean, as sweet as any harmony. And I thought, man, that sounds like something you would read on the EMCSA.
Mm-hmm.
And
she is poetry in motion, after all.
Yeah, exactly. And so I had this idea of, someone writing a story for each of the 20 tracks on this compilation CD, and each one would, have a different mind control theme.
Right.
And then I realized, oh crap, nobody is going to do this if I don't. So I decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to write these 20 stories, and it'll be good practice. Like I said, I had read enough, science fiction with adult themes that I considered writing sex scenes and writing erotic scenes to be a useful skill set to cultivate, even as a vanilla author. So I decided this will be good practice. I'll do these 20 stories, and I'll be done with it. And so, the first thing I wrote was Cars, Gary Newman.
Great song.
Yep. I Melt With You, Modern English. Whip It by Devo. And then the thing that pretty much doomed me happened, which was that I was listening to the radio in my car, and simply...
And you were like, wait,
yeah,
I could expand this idea beyond the CD.
Well, it wasn't even I wasn't even thinking I could expand this idea beyond the CD. It was simply Irresistible came on, and the idea for the story just popped into my head and said, "You're going to write me now." And that wasn't on the CD. And in fact, I actually, in preparation for this interview, I looked it up. I only ever wrote about half the songs on that CD. Which is good.
Still time.
Yeah, but I have no idea how to make Rock Lobster work.
If anybody can do this, sir, it's you. You have to take that hill.
But yes, from that point on, it really did become a problem. The problem of I have nowhere to stop because, right. I don't know if you've noticed this, but they're putting out music faster than I can write.
It's going to be a problem that has no end in sight, I imagine.
Yeah. Actually, that is one of the ways that I come up with ideas. Is there's a couple of websites that just publish song lyrics, songlyrics.com and azlyrics.com.
Yeah, I'm familiar with AZ Lyrics.
Yeah, and I just will go on there and I'll just start reading random song titles until something hits me that says, oh.
That could work.
Like I was flipping through discography of, I think it was Hank Williams, and I saw this song, Relief Is Just to Swallow Away. I'm like, oh my...
Just wait, let's just stop for a moment to just bask in the glory of that.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm done here. I can go for now.
And scene. So, I'm not going to let you get out of this conversation without talking about one of my favorite things that you've done, and it's one of the, it's because you don't tend to do a lot of recurring characters.
This is true. I actually talked about it on my blog, how if all I can think of for the next scene in a story is, and then they just had more sex, it's probably not getting a sequel.
But one of the kind of mythologies, one of the sort of ongoing stories that you have explored, which is among my favorite, is the girls' trademark symbol that have popped up. What, six stories now? I can't remember if that's the right count.
Yeah, I think it is 6. Let's see. Girls Just Want to Have Fun, My Best Friend's Girl, What a Girl Wants, Just a Girl, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. No, it'd be 7.
7.
Then there's Girls, and Factory Girl.
Yeah, and Factory Girl just came out 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and I mean, like I said, I'm working with a bit of a backlog, so it's gonna be a little while before you see it, but actually the story I'm currently writing is Girl Crush.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm so excited, because I love the girl verse, or whatever. Do you have a name for it?
Just the girl series, yeah.
I love the girl series. The one, I think the first one that I read, it's not the first one chronologically, but the first one I read is, I think, the third one, and I'm gonna mess up the title. Which is the third one? The one where the friend from like the softball team comes to check on her friend,
yep,
who is sick, in quotes.
Yeah, that one's What a Girl Wants.
Yeah, What a Girl Wants. That's the first one that I read.
And
I have to tell you, it rocked my world.
yeah, and that one is really kind of the first one where I started thinking of it as an ongoing thing.
Really, yeah.
Because once you start thinking of these as beings, for lack of a better word, with motivations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the first one, the girls just want to have fun. It was just, okay, yeah, sex robot brainwashes people, got it.
Yeah.
And my best friend's girl was, okay, yeah, another sex robot brainwashing people, serial recruitment, okay. But What a Girl Wants, I had to ask myself, why are they doing this?
What does a girl trademark want?
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to get away from the idea of it being sinister, because, I mean, obviously I am submissive myself, and I am in a relationship with someone who has brainwashed me and hypnotized me, and I consider it to be an unalloyed good.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to say, no, this could be a positive thing. The world could be literally a better place if everyone had this sort of better angel perched on their shoulder, who, by the way, could give you orgasms when you did the right thing.
Right. And has awesome flashy lights and vibrator hands.
Yeah. And, the retractable dildo, which actually...
Yes, I was going to say, and plenty of attachments.
Yeah. Which actually that's come to, I think, be more significant to me as I've written the series. Because, I've come to be much more sympathetic and much more attentive to, trans folk in the community and their particular difficulties in being not objectivized or fetishized, and a lot of that has come to have more meaning, that these are girls, but they are girls that are not necessarily traditionally anatomically girls.
Right.
That they have a gender that is more than just their parts, and Factory Girl kind of made that very explicit.
Yes. It certainly comes across.
Yeah.
Given the whole, the sort of the transformative nature, the journey of kind of self-discovery that she's on, and particularly, the way that the story ends, like, her kind of final interaction with the other drones in the factory. I mean, as far as like the writer crafting their ideal world, it really plays out in that scene. We're like, I was this, now I'm this, and they're like, okay.
Yeah, and that was what I thought too when I wrote it. I'm like, okay, this is the point where it's explicit, but actually I've talked to some trans women, and the scene that really hit hardest for them is the scene where she, is brainwashing Rory, and, finds out that Rory has a penis, and is just like, that's great, you're still awesome. And
yeah, and ultimately it's just inconsequential. It's just like, okay.
Yeah, and that was the scene that really hit home for a lot of them, is the idea that, they would be accepted for who they are and for who their bodies, what their bodies are.
I can certainly see how that moment would really have a lot of gravity.
Yeah.
For those individuals.
And at one point, I really did think that Girls, Girls, Girls would be the last story. Because, really there's not... I thought at the time there wouldn't be much to do once you established the origin of them and established that there were, they were making billions of them and preparing to, descend on Earth with them. I kind of felt like, that's...
Where do you go from here?
Yeah, but then Factory Girl suggested itself as the very next story, and Lady Ruetha suggested the idea of girls with guns being a story idea of someone who is trying to subvert their efforts on Earth, not because of morality concerns, but actually because they're rendering pornography obsolete.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah. And so they're trying to start rumors about them, being some sort of sinister device, which it did occur to me that if the girls were starting to become kind of, in their own peculiar way, heroes in these narratives, that there would be room for a villain.
Certainly.
And it led me to the idea of what will hopefully become the boys.
Oh, what a tremendous tease! What a tremendous tease! And perhaps that is a good place to end, because I certainly feel titillated, and hopefully the listening audience does as well. And I'm delighted to hear that you are as enamored of that series as I am, because it really is. It's one of my favorite things. Going on with your work specifically, but also within erotic mind control in general. I'm always delighted when I check on the archive Sunday morning and see anything next to your name that's got the word girls in it. That's always a good time.
Yeah, I will admit that the girls and the superhero stories are the two things I actually have to check myself from writing more of, rather than
they're also the ones that he sits there and giggles while he's writing.
Yes.
Which is just glorious to hear.
Yes, that's when you know it's working. That's when the magic is working. So let's wrap up and quickly let everybody know where they can find you. Obviously, the Erotic Mind Control Story Archive, Jukebox. They can also find your blog at jukeboxemcsa.wordpress.com. Your Patreon page is patreon.com/jukebox. Any other URLs that we should plug?
The Tumblr page is jukeboxemcsa.tumblr.com.
Thank you for reminding me.
If you follow my Patreon blog, I do a weekly post there, with links to any place that story is posted. So, Literotica, EMCSA, FetLife, I will post it in the Erotica group there. But again, if you're going to patreon.com/jukebox on a weekly basis, there is at least one free post a week that will tell you where to find my story for that week.
Excellent. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on the show. It was a really, really fun opportunity to talk with you, as well as Lady Ruetha, who I will also thank as we prepare to sign off here.
I'm sorry I kind of barged in there, but it was getting close to my bedtime.
Not at all, and I'm sorry to keep the both of you up as we podcast here late into the wee hours. So, if you have any fan mail you'd like to send Jukebox's way, that's where you can find him. And fan mail should be your chief concern where Jukebox is concerned, because he's a fantastic writer. If you happen to be one of those people who have never read a Jukebox story, he's got a big catalog. You can basically dive in anywhere. And
if you don't like one, try another one. Trust me.
That's exactly right.
If you don't like one, try another one. He writes everything.
It's like being in a candy store. You're guaranteed to find a few things that are going to be your speed. So thank you very much, Jukebox and Lady Ruetha. A really, really wonderful conversation, and such a treat to talk to you both.
Thank you so much for having us on.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Black Room Podcast. I once again would like to thank my guests, Jukebox and Lady Ruetha, for joining me. Terrific fun talking to both of them. And please come back for the next episode of the Black Room Podcast, which I promise will be out much, much sooner than this episode was. I already have a fantastic interview completed for that episode with a terrific performer named Miana Wolf, who runs a great clips for sale store. She does a lot of really fun, sexy, kinky videos, and mind control and hypnosis are a theme throughout many of them. I'm going to talk to her about that and many other things, so you definitely want to check that out. In the meantime, head to my website to find out what's going on with the show, what's going on with me, and check out my art. It is found at Callidus-mc.com, Callidus-mc.com. Thank you, everyone, once again, for your patience and concern through the long hiatus. I am very, very happy to be back and look forward to joining you again in the very near future for the next episode of the Black Room podcast. Until then, farewell.